I know that many people who are listening to this have probably experienced a lot of unkindness in their lives. We all have too. And I think when you sort of hear that data, it really sort of hits home because you realize this actually really matters. It's not okay when we're not treated with kindness. And that's a problem that goes well beyond the doctor's office. We got to figure this out as a society together.
Well, hello, everyone. Here we are again back on the Dr. Drew Ramsey podcast, talking about mental health, talking about mental fitness. I say the same thing at the beginning of every episode, but it's true. I hope that you take this time for yourself. You take a deep breath. You sit with another wonderful, wonderful friend and expert in mental health, and you're going to leave here in about an hour thinking about kindness and thinking about your mental health in ways hopefully you never have before, and doing that to really improve your mental fitness. We have a wonderful friend, fellow Columbia psychiatry trained psychiatrist, which is a special little world of psychiatry, Kelli Harding, MD, MPH, and she is the official world's kindness expert. She aims to make the world a kinder and healthier place for all. She's an expert in psychiatry, mind-body medicine, and public health. She's got that MPH. She teaches at Columbia University in New York City. She's a favorite among the medical students and among the faculty. She's absolutely wonderful to collaborate with. And then she's an author of the critically acclaimed book, The Rabbit Effect, which I hope you've heard of. If you haven't, you've got to get a copy. It's one of these books that it takes an issue that we all know we should be kind, but it backs it up with so much wonderful science. We'll talk about it more here in just a minute. The Rabbit Effect: Live Longer, Happier, and Healthier with the Groundbreaking Science of Kindness. The Washington Post has compared her to writers like Atul Gawande and Deepak Chopra, with whom she works, has really recommended everybody takes a look at her work. In fact, she's leading and helping teach with Deepak up in Boston here in a few weeks. Her work has been everywhere: at the Today Show, Good Morning America, BBC, the New York Times, Prevention, Oprah, Parents, Medscape, Mind, Body, Dream, and the World Economic Forum. And she's also a 3-time speaker at the World Happiness Summit, which I think started attending that. Kelli Harding, well, the last thing, most part, she's a New Yorker, and she has 3 sons along with her husband. They live in New York City along with their rescue dog, Athena. We're going to have all of her links, but follow her on Instagram. Check out her website, Kelli Harding, MD. Dr. Kelli Harding, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Drew. It is such an honor and joy to have this conversation. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's a treat. Kelli and I have known each other since we were both residents at Columbia. And so really, we've known each other from the very, very first steps, the first days of being a psychiatrist. I probably, if I think back, can remember Kelli's first day as a psychiatrist. And so it's really just a treat to be with you here now, a couple decades into our careers, and both really being interested in the ways that we can understand our mind and enhance some of our maybe qualities or traits like kindness. And so, Kelli, can we start right there? What is kindness?
So kindness is, well, first I'm going to tell you the definition, and then I'm going to actually share a little kindness that you did for me years ago that you might not remember. So kindness is defined as an act of generosity towards others, expecting nothing in return. So no strings attached, essentially. And, it's one of those things that we all kind of know it when we see it. And I actually was going to just remind you. So part of the reason that I went to Columbia is because before it was time for the match, I called up you, and you were listed on the residents, and I talked to you about your experience there. And I remember it was so kind. You took so much time with me to explain how much you enjoyed the program, and it's actually part of the reason that I ended up going there, because I thought, if there are people like Drew Ramsey there, then that's somewhere I would want to be. And here we are, many years later. And just thank you for that kindness.
Oh my gosh, Kelli, thank you for sharing that. That is, I'm reaching back to my memories, trying to pull that back, but
you probably don't remember. And I think
I'm just so touched to hear that. Yeah. I mean, I think you must have been a medical student, and I was like a random, slightly probably hyperthymic resident. I was very excited to be a Columbia resident, and wow, that's wonderful. I didn't know that about us.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is, you never know how an act of kindness is going to make a difference for someone else, and you may not even remember that act of kindness, but just know that it can make a whole difference. And I think in my case, it's like changed the course of my life. So thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for reminding me of that. That's just super meaningful way to start, and I think
Yeah,
everyone. It's a great demonstration also of kindness. I don't often think of myself just maybe as the most kind person, but I think part of being a physician and part of how I've been in the world and dealt with my various challenges is trying to be kind, especially with this type of thing. Something I know about or something I've experienced, and I can, someone asks me and is curious about it. But it's amazing to think. I mean, it's just a very powerful feeling I'm having of just thinking that somehow the fabulous career and life of Kelli Harding, like it got some advice from me and around this or a little input. It's a great demonstration of that. Kelly,
yeah.
as you've been studying kindness and thinking about it, I'm really curious, how has it shaped your own behavior around being generous?
Well, it's made me much more conscientious of it, especially when people call me the doctor of kindness. I feel like I need to live up to that. That said, though, I was going to say, I think what's really remarkable about technology is that, even all the teaching that you do and all the different, the people that are listening to this right now, we don't know how their lives might be lifted up and changed. And I think you may not think of yourself, and maybe for people who are listening, maybe don't think of themselves necessarily as kind people, but when you're trying to teach and trying to better the lives of others in whatever way is authentic for you, I think that is a true act of kindness. And it also builds community. So I think that's really a big part of it. So that's actually building community is probably where I really try to implement a lot of kindness for sure, because we all need community and connection.
It's super helpful because I think so many of us, when we're thinking about kindness, we think about like saying something nice or opening the door
Yeah.
or donating to a charity or being like a quote unquote nice person. A lot of things involved in building and maintaining a community are really hard. Having
Yeah.
a community of individuals that you care about, you respect, that have your back, or kind of maybe there are other needs that we get from communities, but I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit some of like the hard work of kindness that you've seen in your own life, because so often we think about it as nice, or maybe other examples that you see out there in the world. I don't mean to make it all about you.
Sure. Well, so that's a common misperception about kindness is that it's, just sort of being nice or polite. And that's not really the case. Because I think, sometimes the most courageous act of kindness that we see actually are things that are really hard. Standing up for something you believe in, supporting someone else who's maybe having a difficult time, being an ally to somebody that's struggling. Those are all different ways that people can navigate kindness in the world. And I would say a big one that I get a lot of people asking me about is how do you navigate conflict kindly, right? Because conflict is just part of the fabric of life.
Yeah, I worry sometimes. I mean, I love talking about conflict being a psychiatrist, and even I love being in a little conflict in the room. It's
Ah,
always like spicy therapy session when, I mean, I don't mean to make light of it, but it's usually very illustrate something for a therapist and a
yeah.
clinician. But I wouldn't say conflict something that I innately feel great at navigating. How do you navigate conflict with kindness?
Yeah, well, I think actually a therapist's office is a great way to model that because the idea is how do you yes, exactly. So how do you talk about differences in a way that still retains the dignity of the other person? And that's just fundamental to the doctor patient relationship. And so I think that's actually a wonderful sort of training ground for then going out in life and dealing with some of the bigger conflicts that sometimes blindside us or um, we're not sure how to deal with it when it comes up. Because I think that's the thing. Like we sort of can prepare ourselves mentally to deal with conflict, but often conflict just makes its way into our lives in all different kinds of ways that you're not anticipating.
Yeah, it's a little bit like trauma. We act like that's something, there's only certain, rare acts, violent things that happen to other people. Whereas, trauma is one of those, we just had Jim Gordon on, and great mentor, great mind body teacher, and just kind of really has this different way of approaching. It was like, trauma is happening to everyone. Don't think about big T or little t. That's not very helpful. Think about it as a process that you're moving through and has bigger, impacts. But uh, uh,
Yeah, actually, on that note, because it's every other person has a history of an adverse childhood experience so it's like pretty much every other person you pass on the street when you look at the numbers. And I think sometimes when you look at that data, it just makes you a kinder person because you realize, again, it's that whole thing. You never know what someone else is struggling with, or sort of when you see bad behavior or what you might label as bad behavior or difficult behavior, that it might be that they're really struggling with something that you have just absolutely no idea about. And that's, you know, part of kindness.
it's one of the things I liked about being in the hospital. Something that I felt that really taught me about compassion is that you'd see people who I'd have my whatever transference reaction to. I think it looks like a mean businessman or, this type of person or that type of person. And then when you're in a hospital, that's someone who's there because they're sick or someone that they love is sick. And they're sick, they're in the hospital. And so to somebody, no matter who they were, they kind of went into this new category for me as patient. They were patient, and they deserve a level of kind of kindness and compassion that I would say I had to grow in a certain way. There's nothing that you could say or do really that was going to get in the way of it. It was like an unwavering commitment to kindness and compassion. It's one of the things I loved about medical school and also residency at Columbia, learning to be a therapist. It's like anything that got in the way of your compassion, it's like, oh, that's something you've got to understand and work on.
And actually, I think that's a really lovely way to go through life because I think, not just with our patients, but everyone, what if we just approach the world with that kind of compassion? So everybody who's listening, like looking for something to like about somebody else. And I think when you're in the role as a caregiver, you have to find something you like about that person and that you can be kind and compassionate about. And, you know, that in itself is a really powerful mindset towards making those around you and making your world a kinder place. And it's not easy, it's a practice.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the practice of it, but I don't want to get too far into our talk without talking just a little bit about the rabbit effect, because this book was so exciting. It's such a bold title, right? Everybody thinks the rabbit effect is going to tell us all that we should have a lot more sex. So I did, and it's not what the book was about. Tell us about the rabbit effect and how do we learn about kindness from rabbits?
Sure. And I have to tell you, so when the book first came out, I ended up on all these radio programs where people had clearly not read the book. And I would get some really inappropriate questions.
Like, how many times a day should I have sex to have the rabbit effect?
They were very disappointed when they discovered the actual topic. But yeah, so I'm happy to tell the story about the rabbits. And I think it really embodies kindness on so many different levels. So the book gets its title from this study that was done in the late 1970s by this wonderful researcher by the name of Dr. Robert Nerum. And he was looking at heart health in rabbits. And it was around the time where we didn't really have a clear understanding that so relates to your work, between diet and the body and diet and heart health at that time that we now know is so also linked to brain health. And so he designed super straightforward experiment, gave all these rabbits the same high-fat diet, expected the same results. And lo and behold, one of the groups of rabbits had a 60% difference compared to the other rabbits when he went to go look at the findings. And they thought it was a mistake and everything checked out. And then they realized that all the rabbits that did better were under the care of this one researcher who wasn't just feeding the rabbits, she was picking up the rabbits, she was petting the rabbits, she was talking to them, she was, essentially giving them lots of love and kindness. And Dr. Nerum, who is really one of my science heroes, he realized, like, could it be that our social world is impacting the biology of these animals? And at the time, it was a radical idea. And he said, I was a basic scientist researcher, but if this were true, it fundamentally changes how we think about health. And so they went ahead, they repeated the experiment, they got the exact same results, and they published it in Science. And, now we have decades of public health data that just shows how we're treated in all the different areas of our lives is just so essential. So, I know that many people who are listening to this have probably experienced a lot of unkindness in their lives. We all have too. And I think when you sort of hear that data, it really sort of hits home because you realize this actually really matters. It's not okay when we're not treated with kindness, and we have to. That's a problem that goes well beyond the doctor's office. We got to figure this out as a society together, and as human beings. And we're not doing so good at it right now.
Well, I'm just
So,
grinning because I haven't put two and two together. But when our daughter will be a little bit mean to her son, my wife says, kindness, kindness.
oh
And
yeah,
and it's the way your mantra is in our home.
that makes me happy to hear. Yeah.
How do you assess kindness in someone's life? And I think for everyone listening, this kind of relates of, especially if you're dating or meeting new people. I guess ideally, we have limited bandwidth. Kind of selecting for people who are have a little more kindness in them probably is good for our health and mental fitness. Is there a way that we can kind of assess kindness?
So there are different sort of like kindness metrics and things like that. But I would say just for like the average user. So first of all, so kindness is a practice and we all have our moments, right? So, I'm trying to think it's a little like, you know, uh, it's something you have to continually sort of renew, like, trying to think like hygiene or something. It's like something that we all have to do continually.
It's not like a fixed trait. There's a way that if you're
It's
not feeling a lot of kindness or you've been super mean to this morning, it doesn't mean
yeah,
you're a mean person. It means you haven't like worked your kindness muscle.
exactly. And kindness, just like any practice, is essentially a muscle. And so I think the thing is, it is just, and I'm just convinced of this, having seen, thousands of patients and talked about this all over the world, is that fundamentally human beings have kindness. It is part of, because kindness is just so central to connection and social connection and positive social connection. It is something that none of us would be here without kindness, because we depend on the kindness of caregivers when we're little and each step of our lives. It's actually like, if you think about your life and go backwards, it's just astounding the number of people that have helped you get to this exact moment in your life.
Hmm.
And so kindness is just such a part of human existence, that it's always there. And the question, I see my role sometimes is like, how do I kind of dust things off and take a look and sort of see how can we draw out the things that are kinder? How do we create more kindness in this person's life? Whether it be sort of creating more social connections, all the different areas. Sometimes it's self-kindness. How do we be kinder to ourselves and treat ourselves better? It's like we would a good friend or something. There are so many different ways that we can kind of look at it, but it's always, always there 100% of the time. And I actually have done a lot of work with people that have had really, really tough lives and done some tough things. And I have to say, even with them, I always find that grain of kindness. It's there. So,
Well, because I think a lot of times when we're struggling with depression, for example, right, or we've been traumatized, it's hard to kind of get into this stance of seeing this, kind of a large pyramid of kindness that we're standing on the top of. And I'm wondering, especially for folks listening, when they're in that spot, and I've been in that spot over the last year, just like, I don't know, not the part of my mind I like, more resentful, more negative.
yeah.
So anybody listening there, I'm wondering, how do you work with somebody when we're in that state of like, we're having a hard time seeing the kindness or feeling it or dusting it off, as you say? Are there ways that we can kind of shift how we look at our past a little better to see more kindness?
Well, so part of it is looking backwards, but I actually think one of the best things is taking action. So doing a kind action
Oh,
yourself, because it's got this incredible knock-on effect. And the studies show that doing an act of kindness boosts our mood. The person who receives it typically is also boosted, not always, but typically. And then for those who actually witness the act of kindness, there's a benefit as well. So, but actually like a big tip that I have for people who are listening is, if you're in a funk or you're not feeling great, doing an act of kindness actually, and doing, I would say, even like small, tiny acts of kindness. They don't have to be like big,
tell
grandiose
us some.
things.
I want to hear
Can
your
be,
like Kelli Harding's in a bad mood, look cranky and mean, right? The boys have got you
yep.
upset. You realize, what are some of your go-to small kind acts of kindness?
Sure. So, well, there's probably random acts of kindness that are just fun to do, which, can be thinking about just something random and nice to do for somebody that's in your life. So maybe it's like bringing a friend some flowers or dropping some flowers at a neighbor's door. I've actually done that many times. You know, Reaching out to a friend is an act of kindness, or can just saying, I'm thinking about you and just want to tell you how much I value having you in my life. And actually, while I'm saying that, Drew, I'm just so grateful to have you in my life. Thank you. And then also, like little things like chatting with a cashier behind the counter saying, how's your day going? It's surprising to me how many people tell me, like, nobody ever asked me that. And thank you for that. And it's funny because I walk away feeling a bit uplifted, and presumably hopefully they do as well. I think that's the thing. And actually even little things like picking up a piece of trash that nobody else is involved in, but you know that you've somehow beautified where you're living. Those are just sort of countless ways. And the thing is, once you start looking, it's that observer bias. You actually start seeing lots of ways that you can contribute. And there's that sense of, we talked a little bit about purpose before the call, that having that can actually help you like hook into like, what is your purpose, what's your meaning? And that is a fast track to getting out of depression, I have to say. It's really powerful.
Thinking of acts of kindness within maybe your realm of purpose. I really love the idea of random acts of kindness because, as I said, a lot of times we think kindness is being nice. So when I'm grumpy, I'm not that. I don't know. I'm gonna be nice, right? But I love these kind of small interactions. One of the reasons I love being a New Yorker is you had all these little interactions with people that over time, because it's such a big anonymous place, it, being known and knowing someone, it takes on this great meaning and intensity. So whether it was my barber or whether it was a couple of the checkout people that you just you see over and over again, or a waiter and a waitress in a restaurant, that it really it's a great place to have these random acts of kindness, and a wonderful way to I don't know, shake things up if you're feeling bad. Not what we usually think about. Hey, don't focus on yourself so much, what it's about, where it came from. This time, just go do something really kind and random for someone, small.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I was just thinking in New York, one of my favorite things to do, and if anyone who's lives somewhere near public transportation, is to thank a bus driver or thank a subway driver, just shout out, thank you. And they're like, face lights up, we get waves. Like, it's really pleasant. We've made a point of sort of doing that as part of our family. And I have to say, it sort of feels like it connects you to other people. And that's the key, right? Like, all of these acts connect you to other people and get you out of sort of particularly, when we're feeling depressed or anxious, it gets in that like self spiral where you're not feeling connected to, this incredible field around us of all the kindness that's out there, and all the other people. It reminds you of that.
No, it really does, and you see the way that you're part of the fabric. That when we're in a world where we're kind to one another, where we're in a service task, and we feel the appreciation of our community. I think it makes a huge difference. It's also, as you said, how communities get built. It's these little small
Yeah.
acts and this intentionality.
Yeah, actually, one point with that. So there have been studies that even if you just say hi to six neighbors, like if you know six of your neighbors, you're actually more likely to be trusting of the people in your neighborhood, which is pretty incredible because, and New Yorkers don't always know their neighbors, but in a lot of big cities, it can be impersonal. But I actually, knowing this data now, I've made more of a point getting to know neighbors. Maybe it means like starting a WhatsApp group, or like, just connecting with people, celebrating how you can find ways to connect.
It's a really, really important point. I don't think it's just New Yorkers who don't know their neighbors. People, there's been a lot of movement over the last few years, a lot of movement because I think, both because of COVID and just all of the natural disasters that we're having, that lots of people are in new situations. And that happened to me. I moved about 3 years ago. And, it gets awkward maybe after a few months if you haven't said hi or you haven't met somebody. And I don't know, a few months ago, I just said that wasn't, I'd been engaged in that. And I walked over to a couple neighbors, shook their hands. We had someone new move in across the street, went over, said hi, shook their hands. My kids are mowing their lawn now, and just kind of exactly what you hope for in a community. But
Yeah.
it's tough. I think it's something we all want. I think everybody listening, I'd encourage you to reach out and see what happens, because we so often are looking past each other and looking for connection and community maybe elsewhere, especially if we're not feeling well. And so, I hope this podcast may be a little reminder to double down. One of my mom's best friend had this phrase that my mom loved: "Bloom where you're planted." And
Oh, I
when I
love
think,
that. Yeah.
yeah, I've always Susan Sunflower was her name. So and
Oh,
Susan, um, and I really liked that. A lot of different ways to say that. Having gratitude, making do what you have. But I like the idea of blooming. Because it
yeah.
requires us to really plant deeper roots, right? We have to kind of grow a big stem, and then we have to do this really kind of evolutionarily, I'm gonna say silly thing. We're gonna spend a lot of energy doing something magnificent and beautiful and creative. And and so yeah, it's wonderful that she comes up.
Yeah, it so beautifully models some of the principles of mindfulness that I know you've talked about in other episodes, because it's really sort of looking at a situation from many different angles and thinking about, and this is, I think, really the heart of kindness is how can I make it better for someone else, or how can I make it better for the people that might come after me? So, which in itself is a really powerful legacy. And so, there is courage in taking action, and just taking action feels good. And I just want to also say you're going to get some rejections and people are not going to be interested, but good for you, because that's actually part of the thing is just putting yourself out there and just reminding yourself no means next. So, like,
It's
giving it a
really that
try.
no means next. I mean, when you offer out some kindness, or you go to open a door, or you try a kind act, and it kind of backfires, you get some hostility or aggression or negativity, that just means next one. Just like keep moving. Like not everybody's ready to receive the kindness.
Yeah, exactly. They might not be at a good spot for that. And I'd say that also goes for social connection, which we know is also so important for mental health. And thankfully, we are now, have a Surgeon General that's really highlighted this for the nation, and just how important those connections are. And when you reach out to people to try to make those connections, just expect rejection is going to be part of it. And it may actually have nothing to do with you, but just your effort in trying plants the seed, speaking of blooming.
Yeah, and a big shout out to Vivek Murthy, the U.S. Surgeon
Yeah.
General. He's been on Friday sessions with Greg Scott Brown, our male mental health series, talking about connection. Also, as I think the Know Your Neighbor, I think that's one of his campaigns where he's really, along with all the things the Surgeon General needs to help us with, right, quitting smoking and eating a healthy diet and moving our bodies. Yeah, I've been such a fan that he's really been after us, to connect, to know our neighbors, to
Oh
to be
my
kind
gosh,
to one
yeah.
another, especially now. Kelly,
It
we're in a
is
really
it's the rabbit effect in action. I have to say, like, his whole platform is just so exciting because it's like I wrote it in the book, and then just see it happening and people talking about it is just so exciting.
well, yeah. You really brought the kind. You gave the kindness movement more of a shape than it had. I felt of really kind of calling attention to it, thinking about it as something to assess and to work on, and really central. We talk a lot about mindfulness and our breath, and connecting to ourselves, and it's also wonderful. But I think for so many people, it becomes a little isolating or lonely or selfish. And so, what I love about your work is it instantly involves somebody else, because
Yeah.
kindness, we can be kind to the environment and to our animals and all this, but we feel it most when with another person. How do you, in the politically polarized, angry, world that we find ourselves in right now, how do you approach that level of hostility from a stance of kindness? And I guess specifically, I'm meeting so many people I've spoken with, friends, family, patients. Political discord has led to a severing of very important connections, whether it's family, friends, institutions,
Mm,
in a way that really bothers me as a psychiatrist. When your politics, cause families to fracture, it happens. I don't know. I'm wondering if you can help us understand how we can use
yeah.
kindness when we encounter polarizing opinions and hostility.
Well, one of the things that gives me a tremendous amount of hope about humanity actually is that, because, writing about kindness and studying kindness, I get called to speak to all different kinds of groups and do workshops for all kinds of different folks. And what I find striking is that people who sort of in many ways are, you know, seem sort of diametrically opposed, at the same time, really feel that kindness is part of their mission. It's just they may be looking at it from a different way. And I think, yeah, again, it's like it comes back to like it's such a fundamental part of the human experience. And if we can sometimes realize that we are maybe talking about the same things, but just using different language, and sometimes it's language that's been polarized by people beyond us, and kind of trying to get a step away a little bit from some of that and just look at those core human elements. Because I think, as a doctor, you just realize people, many people just want kind of the same things, like to, you know, have to love and be loved, to feel that they've got some sort of place in the world that they can contribute, that they feel respected and, you know, uh, good about their experience and positive emotions. And I think when you sort of like put all the other stuff aside and look at that, it can actually be really encouraging, and ways to build connections with people and build back the dialogue. Because I agree, it's scary when it feels like there's not a conversation happening around some important issues. Because again, it's talking is a part of kindness and trying to understand where somebody else is coming from.
Do you stop people as it gets maybe hostile and sort of say, "Hey, I first just want to recognize like this is an issue that we both care a lot about, and it's really I
Yeah.
want to like how when it kind of gets I don't know heated or I'm asking because like my heart just starts to race and I feel like I'm 12 and I don't know and I want to do a better job and so if I were Kelli Harding like yeah what do I is it, can you help me with a little more I guess yeah is there something you say or something you do that kind of softens those conversations?
Well, so usually when people are upset, it's because they want to feel heard. And so
Mhm.
helping someone else feel heard and just letting them know that you hear them and you hear their concern can go a very long way. Because that's the thing, you want to do what you can to connect. And I mean, frankly, this goes beyond somebody who's got a different political view. It could be your kid who's angry and yelling at you too. Like people want to be seen and know that that's happening. And oftentimes, I think there are even studies on this that if you let somebody express themselves, it almost never goes beyond a minute or 2 minutes, and they just need to get that out. And sometimes that's okay. And I think the other thing is to start to, and this is where any activity that increases your own mindfulness. And for some people, that's meditation. For other people, it's gardening or something else. Like paying attention to how you're feeling in your own body. So if you're starting to feel your anger levels rising, you can even say, I would love to have this conversation. I need to walk away and calm down for a little bit. That's fine too. Or I'd love to come back to this when I'm in a better place to have this talk. Yeah, because I think you also need to recognize when you're sort of moving from that frontal cortex into your more fight or flight primitive brain and amygdala response.
I just try and sit and listen when that happens to me, which I hear you adding in maybe listening, but also kind of communicating a little bit of what I hear. Here are the issues I'm hearing are really important to you. Like I'm here, because I sometimes I'm find when I'm just breathing there with my heart racing, it's kind of I don't know. As my daughter says, I look a little strange, right? And so maybe being a little bit more active, or is you're kind of suggesting I've never really tried this move. Just say, hey, I think I'm too upset to have this conversation right now, but I really want to have it with you. I'm gonna go have a little kombucha, take a walk, collect my thoughts, maybe give the person a little, handshake, a little hug, and be like, hey, let's continue soon. I'm sorry, I'm so sensitive, and off I go, I guess, and try and get
Yeah.
centered.
Actually, that's a lovely way to do it. And actually the hug, releases oxytocin. I was going to say you can even give yourself a little hug, which fools your brain into thinking you're getting a
I have
hug.
some fantasy that we can like hug out the angry, polarizing stuff. I realize that probably doesn't exactly always work and isn't the most practical.
Well, one thing on that point, because, I think behind a lot of the sort of anger is a lot of fear. And, when a lot of times if we're the opposite, people debate this, but I would say, in my opinion, a lot of the opposite of fear is actually love. So when people are feeling loved, they're less afraid. They feel more courageous, more strong. And so trying to come back to that fundamental connection in some way. And if it's your kid in front of you, maybe it's like, can I give you a hug and we can come back to this? Or if you're not feeling in a place where your body's secure, just walking away and later trying a hug or something like that. But I hear you.
I won't force any hugs on the polarizing people who are debating with me right away. I do really love this notion though that you're describing of uh,
A virtual
how
hug,
to
maybe.
yeah, well, and how to um, just how to keep present in our minds this awareness of ourself, awareness of connection, and the kind of need for kindness. Really appreciate also how you describe love as something that builds security. That we feel heard, we feel seen. We don't necessarily, when we're loved and in love, need to agree with everything. It's fascinating to me is how love really transcends our differences. That my wife can think some really different things, but man, I'm going to support her and these ideas because I'm a big fan. And I
Yeah.
think that being seen, being known, and then that kind of commitment that comes with love, even if it's challenging, even if it's difficult, what's important is keeping it going and keeping it kind of vibrant. It's a very important way for us to think about it. So often love gets to be this either kind of romantic or sexualized thing, and so
Oh, yeah.
that's so fundamental to community, right? Do you love your community? I think it's a hard time. Reminds me, it's hard for us to be like, yes. So often we have these conflicts or concerns or quibbles, or we're bothered by this, our housing association, or this or that, and it's hard for us to kind of yelp it, proclaim it, really commit to the love of these institutions, communities, things that are so important to our mental health and to our progress.
Yeah, and actually, on that note, I just wanted to add because you may not be able to give someone who's mad at you a hug, or it may not be their or your coworker or some other situation, but you can do things, and there's obviously all the loving kindness data that is just extraordinary. That sort of wishing somebody else well changes your approach to them, and I think that is so powerful because people also can sense when you don't like them, when you are thinking judgmental about them, like all that stuff. And so when you kind of come at it with this idea of I'm wishing you well and I'm wishing you love, and you can even, if you like, it reminds me of Phil Stutz's work, like you imagine like white light kind of wrapping around them, doing something to kind of imagine what that might look like, you can kind of change the dynamic enough to just sort of bring those energy levels back down to the point where you can have a conversation, which is a big deal and a hard practice, but worth it.
No, I also love the idea that one of these random kindness acts is sending good vibes. A text, an email, positive energy, a DM. That more of that is good for you and good for your community.
Yeah. I was going to say, just think about when you last got somebody sending you a nice note and it just made you feel good. And then the next person you saw, you were in a better spirits and all that.
Oh,
So,
I had the best example of this from one of our friends, fellow psychiatrist Jeff Miller. Jeff and I were talking about a bunch
oh,
of
Jeff.
stuff, and it was just a nice conversation. We caught up, and it was about a month later. I got a picture of him. He was in an Aspen Glen skiing somewhere, and it was just this moment. He was all by himself, and we'd had a kind of moment connecting, talking about being on the mountain and looking forward to being on the mountain someday. But it just really was one of those days where I was in a grumpy mood. I'd said something, I don't know, to my wife about like, oh, is anybody even like, I don't know what I said, some negative thing. And then there's this like pictures like thinking of you. And it just made my day and just really lifted me up. And so everyone listening, maybe that's your assignment or your homework, or I always ask with every episode that we do something, right? That something's going to stick with you. One of these wonderful little pearls of kindness wisdom that Kelli has shared with us is going to stick with you, or something resonated. And I always encourage you to do something with that mental health and mental fitness really depend, of course, on our awareness. Self-awareness is really at the core of this mental fitness paradigm I've been describing, but it really requires our action. Like awareness doesn't do anything for us other than really, help us see the problem for what it is or the challenges ahead of us. Um, Kelli, I'm
I
going to
love that. It
regret.
primes us for action.
Yeah, awareness primes us for action. Kelli, I'm going to regret if we don't get to talk just a little bit about male mental health, because you're raising
Oh,
three
yeah.
sons. You've been raising three sons.
Yeah.
Everyone I think listening hopefully knows about Friday Sessions, this great interview series that Greg Scott
Oh,
Brown and I have
I
been doing with
love
men's
it.
health,
Yes, it's so
talking about male
good.
mental health. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering for you what it looks like on the ground raising boys today in the modern world of ways that you're helping your sons think about things like kindness.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, first of all, parenting is so hard. And the most important thing is to know you're not alone in it, that there are tons of resources out there and connections to try to figure this out. I love the series that you're doing. It's just wonderful. And I think that's a key piece of it is we haven't been talking about men's mental health and to do that more openly. A lot of it has also to do with a sort of connection. So how do we build connections? And of course, they're the sort of parenting data that you look at it when one of the greatest ways to help with that and teach your kids that is to actually model it yourself. So maybe that means, like joining a parent community, or I actually just recently created one with a friend called the Neuroparent Alliance for parents of neurodiverse kids, which can feel really isolating and, has its own stigma with it. And also like thinking about how you can show and demonstrate to your kids all these different things. So, I've one of the things I love doing is creating communities. So I've created something with some colleagues called Our Kind of Club, where we monthly meet with people from around the world to talk about kind deeds that are going on. It's been absolutely incredible. We've had people from over 20 countries join us to talk about kindness. And, the state of the world does not look so kind when you look at the newspaper, but I involve my kids in that. So I would say, one of the things is to think about like, what are you doing anyhow that you're passionate about that you could model for your kids, involve them? One of the greatest ways to model kindness is education. And, there's crazy data how good education is for our health, and it boggles my mind every time as a physician. There's that data that for every one life saved by medicine, education saves eight. So you can think about how can you teach some of these things, how can you get your kids teaching. So like I involve the kids in our kind of club, I get them out thinking about our community and how we can contribute, doing sort of those outward facing things. And then probably the biggest thing I do is I try my best to also focus on some self kindness, because that'll help me be less judgmental with them, kinder in my interactions, and pause a lot, because studies show we're just nicer people when we pause for a moment, because it helps our frontal cortex come back online.
That's a really wonderful tip too, of just to pause a little bit, listen a little longer, take a moment before you react, and really make sure you're coming from a stance of kindness whenever possible. Um, I just I love that advice. It sounds like also with your boys, getting them involved and getting them kind of active and helping others, whether that's doing some work in the community, maybe a Habitat for Humanity project, but kind of letting them know and signaling to them that their education and development around this, obviously it's your favorite subject, but there are a lot of other things that I'm sure you're developing in them. And I seeing you honor those and focus on those, I think also really signals to them. Do you think masculinity or manhood is changing? Like, do you think your boys are having a different experience of being a dude than men 20 years ago? And if so, what?
Well, that's since I have, I would say actually from some of my work, and particularly working with students, you see how ideas change over time. And one of the things that I have just been so encouraged by is with younger people, their ability to talk about emotions in a way that I know I never saw, 20 years ago. So I'm hopeful that that will be sort of across the board for all genders, something that is, just to normalize feelings, because we all got them, and it's fine to talk about them, even the unpleasant ones. So I think that's a big part of it. I should say we have at home one of those charts from the fellow at Yale, and I'm blanking on his name right now, but that does the feelings chart.
The feelings
So,
wheel? Is this the
well, there's the feelings wheel, and then there's the big grid. We've got one. There's a variety of them out there, but we have one. We've pasted to the fridge.
No, this is a great recommendation. I'm not even sure I have one of these in my house. Samantha on our team, Samantha O'Creef, has been a therapist working with me for almost a decade now, and she brought the feelings wheel. I remember she whipped it out. I was like, it's not exactly satisfying. She's like, look at the feelings wheel. And I was like, what's the feelings wheel? And so the feelings wheel, everybody listening, is you can print it out. You can Google it when you go home. We'll link to it maybe in the show notes. And it's just a kind of wonderful circle filled with all these different types of emotions, all the shades of being down and sad, all the shades of being up and focused and energized. And just with this encouragement for us all to get a little better at describing what's going on inside and a little more, nuance in our language about that. That's a great thing to put up, especially put up if you have boys. To get more, maybe we'll call it like emotional fluency. I got to speak with Mark Brackett at Yale, and has
It's Mark Brackett's grid.
yeah,
That's who I was trying to think of.
Mark
Yes.
Brackett. Yeah, he has just a wonderful, wonderful emotional education curriculum that's really been instituted in schools throughout the world to just
Yeah.
really help with this stuff that we need some more education sometimes on just how to handle our own emotions and our own minds.
Yeah. And actually, on that note, even talking about our own emotions and when we're not feeling that good, I think that's another thing, particularly working in sort of like the world of wellness and positivity, like acknowledging when we're not feeling great too, is also modeling that for our kids, that it's okay to also feel negative
Yeah, I
sometimes.
find that one hard. I know I'm supposed to be like, oh, I'm really down in the dumps and sad about this or that, but I think that's tough as a parent. I think especially for men and dads right around, and everyone. I mean, moms too. We just, there's a way that you don't want to intimate or let whatever you're struggling with kind of rain on whatever parade they could be having. And at the same time, we don't want to shield our kids from that. Is there a way that you like balance that? Do you like talk with your husband and kind of get a little game plan or is it just more spontaneous of you if they notice, or, I know it's sort of a complex, big question, but like, how do you manage sharing more of your emotional life with the kids?
And I'd love for people maybe to put in the chat, like, how do they navigate that, because I feel like that's something we all kind of struggle with, is how much do you sort of protect kids versus show them some of those feelings? I think the reality is kids are perceptive and they pick up when you're not in a great mood, or it's okay to say I'm having a hard time. It reminds me of the Gottman research, though, sort of like when it comes to negative comments, like what is the ratio? It's like for one negative comment, having 5 positive for good relationships. It's sort of that idea too. Like it's probably for, it's perfectly fine to acknowledge I'm having a tough day and I'm just going to take a moment of me time right here and sort of get myself in a better place. And it shows them how to regulate their emotions too, in the way that feels good for you.
I think as I'm reflecting how I do that as a parent, oftentimes it's like as I'm tucking somebody in, and I want them to know there's like an explanation when it's like if I know I've been off, or like, sorry, I seem irritable, or like, you said I seem this or that, and I think it's because of this, right? So at least there's an awareness of like, oh yeah, no, I'm I have awareness, and that it's part of like the normal emotional spectrum. It's not that we can't ever feel sad or angry. It's but we gotta have kind of awareness of it to manage it most effectively.
Absolutely. And I think actually calling that out, because it's part of the human experience, feeling down sometimes and feeling upset. And it also just helps normalize it for the people that are around you. So I guess it's part of that emotional health. And maybe for those listening to consider challenging yourself, it feels really vulnerable to say it, but to just say, having a tough day. You don't have to go into the details, but, let them know that you need a little. It's funny because I feel like, maybe that's where you say, I'm going to have my kombucha and go for a walk. And that shows for them. That's what you do when you're down. You get to connect with nature and have something that's good for your body.
Yeah, no, I feel it's been we've been really focused on the movement part, of how do you kind of get into those good habits of just keeping your body active, keep challenging yourself, working those various aspects of movement, whether it's flexibility and just it's wild raising kids in an era of like a foam roller, whereas like the other day where our daughter went for a run, her knee was hurting, and I was like, all right, let's talk about the IT band here, and like we can be lifelong friends and foam rolling partners now, and
Drew,
it's
that's so funny. Yeah, we use a foam roller a lot in our house too. So,
I mean, it's a fun thing to be in an era where we're thinking about our health, where our kids see us trying. It does feel like there's been a shift in the, younger kids of I see this a lot in the younger men. Obviously, I see a bit of a biased population in the young men I get to treat, but even just like a lot of the young guys I'm encountering out in the world, a lot more sobriety, a lot more emotional awareness, a lot more listening. I mean, I know it's not universal, but it does feel like we're seeing more of a shift. And Kelli, I love you getting us all thinking about our kindness. That's a way to transcend so much of this and getting focused on the actions that we can take. I hope everybody hears Kelli's request that we drop in some comments about how you find that kind of balance between sharing emotions and your inner emotional state for those of you who have kids, but even, for those of you who don't, thinking about in your own life with friends and family. We'd love to check that out. We'll take a peek in the comments and reply as best we can. And then most importantly, I really want everybody to think about how something in this podcast can inspire you to put more kindness out there in your life through something that resonated with you. It's a really exciting idea to think that, thousands of folks could watch this. If you get to this moment, I really hear it as an inspiration and a catalyst to create more kindness. Kelli, I'm sure that so many of your podcasts, your content, the magazine stuff you've done, your TV work, it's really fun to think about all the thousands of people who somewhere have this. I always think, anytime I see yellow, I think of you for some reason. I think it's the book, but it's also just, I have this very we get inspired to make more kindness in the world for you or by you. And so thank you, I guess, for you, if you're like the overlord of kindness, but I just see you as the queen of kindness so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. And maybe that's a good note to end on, because I think for those who are listening, it's just a question of how you can be the light or be the sun in someone else's life, because you all have the capability. And drop it in the comment. Tell us what you did and let us know so we can be inspired too.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. And this is Dr. Kelli Harding. It's been another episode of the Dr. Drew Ramsey podcast. Thank you so much for your time. Please share these episodes with someone who needs a little more kindness, needs a little help and encouragement with their mental health and mental fitness. And most importantly, thank you for your time and attention. It means so much to get to share a little time thinking about mental health and mental fitness with you. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks so much.